As a humble student and scholar who has spent a lifetime immersed in the profound teachings of the Dharma, I have often been asked to recount the story of the man who became the Buddha. It is a narrative that has been told and retold for over 2.5 millennia. A story so powerful that it has shaped civilizations and guided countless beings toward a life of wisdom and peace. Yet, to truly understand this journey is to move beyond the realms of myth and hagiography. It is to engage with a profound psychological and philosophical odyssey, a testament to the ultimate potential that lies dormant within the human heart. The question of, how did Siddhartha Gautama become the Buddha, is not a query about a simple change of title or status. It is a question about the most radical transformation a human being can undergo, the complete and irrevocable awakening from the slumber of ignorance to the luminous reality of things as they are. It was not a divine endowment or a miraculous event, but a process, a painstaking, courageous, and deeply compassionate process of letting go, of seeing through, and of realizing a truth so profound it could extinguish the very flames of suffering. This is the story of that process, a journey from a gilded cage of illusion to the boundless freedom of enlightenment. Part 1. The Prince in the Gilded Cage. Our story begins in the 6th century BCE, in the fertile plains of the Himalayan foothills, within the small republic of the Shakya clan. It was an era of great intellectual and spiritual ferment in India. The old Vedic traditions, with their emphasis on ritual and priestly authority, were being challenged by a new wave of thinkers and wanderers known as sramanas. These were seekers who renounced the householder life to pursue spiritual liberation through meditation, asceticism, and philosophical inquiry. It was into this dynamic world that Siddhartha Gautama was born. The legends surrounding his birth are imbued with a sense of cosmic destiny. His mother, Queen Mahamaya, is said to have dreamt of a white elephant entering her side, a potent symbol of purity and auspiciousness. Upon his birth in the garden of Lumbini, seers and sages were summoned to the court of his father, King Suddhodana, the most revered among them. The sage Asita wept. He wept not from sorrow, but from a bittersweet joy, for he saw on the infant the 32 marks of a Mahapurusa, a great man. Asita prophesied a dual destiny for the child. He would either become a Chakravartin, a righteous world-conquering monarch, or he would renounce the world to become a fully awakened Buddha, a teacher for all humanity. King Suddhodana, a pragmatic ruler and a loving father, was determined that his son would fulfill the worldly destiny. He resolved to create an environment so perfect, so saturated with pleasure and devoid of any hint of life's harshness, that the contemplative path would never even occur to his son. This was the genesis of Siddhartha's gilded cage. The young prince was raised in unparalleled luxury. He was provided with 3 magnificent palaces, one for the hot season, one for the cold, and one for the rains. He was surrounded by beauty in all its forms, lotus ponds of blue, red, and white, the finest silks and perfumes, the most talented musicians and graceful dancers. He was educated in all the princely arts, archery, statecraft, literature, and philosophy, and he excelled at them all. Possessing a keen intellect and a naturally compassionate disposition, he married the beautiful and virtuous Princess Yashodhara, and in time, they had a son, whom he would name Rahula. By every conceivable worldly standard, Siddhartha's life was perfect. He had attained the pinnacle of what humans strive for: wealth, status, power, love, and family. Yet, it is a testament to the depth of his innate wisdom, what the tradition calls the maturation of his paramis, or perfections, cultivated over countless lifetimes, that he could not find lasting satisfaction in this world of fleeting pleasures. Within the perfumed walls of his palaces, a profound spiritual unease began to stir. He saw that even the most exquisite joy was transient. The beautiful melody would end. The dancer would tire. The bloom of youth would inevitably fade. This perception was the first stirring of his insight into the universal characteristic of anicca, or impermanence. He began to understand that anything subject to arising is also subject to ceasing. This insight gave rise to a deep existential question: if all happiness is fleeting, if all beauty is destined to decay, what is the point? Where can one find a true, lasting refuge? The gilded cage, designed to be a paradise, was slowly revealing itself to be a prison, a prison of sensual distraction that shielded him not from suffering itself, but from the knowledge of suffering. This growing disquiet, this holy sense of urgency known as samvega, would become the engine of his quest. Part 2. The Four Sights and the Great Renunciation. The turning point came when Siddhartha's desire to see the world beyond the palace walls became undeniable. King Suddhodana, unable to refuse his son, arranged a series of excursions into the city of Kapilavastu. He gave strict orders that the streets be cleansed and decorated, and that only the young, healthy, and cheerful be allowed to line the prince's route. But the forces of destiny, or perhaps the prince's own ripening karma, could not be so easily managed. The scriptures say that divine beings, recognizing that the time was ripe for the future Buddha's awakening, manifested four sights that would shatter his world of illusion forever. On his first journey, amidst the carefully curated scenes of prosperity, Siddhartha's gaze fell upon a man who had been missed by the king's men, an old man, frail and decrepit, with wrinkled skin, a bent back, and trembling limbs. Having never witnessed advanced age, the prince was profoundly shocked and asked his charioteer, Channa, what this strange being was. Channa was compelled to explain that this was old age, the inevitable fate that awaits all who are born. This was Siddhartha's first direct confrontation with the decay of the body, the truth of impermanence made manifest. Deeply unsettled, the prince undertook a second journey. This time, he saw a sick man, his body covered in sores and racked with disease, groaning in agony by the roadside. Again, he questioned Channa, who explained that this was illness, a vulnerability inherent in the human body that could strike anyone, rich or poor, at any time. This sight revealed the fragility of life and the reality of physical suffering, a dimension of existence from which he had been completely shielded. The third journey delivered the most profound shock. He encountered a funeral procession carrying a corpse, a still, lifeless body, pale and cold. For the first time, Siddhartha was face to face with the stark, undeniable reality of death. Channa explained that this was the universal end for all beings. No one, not even the most powerful king, is exempt. The prince was overcome with a sense of futility. If life, with all its striving, ambitions, and affections, ultimately ends in this absolute cessation, what is its ultimate meaning? The love he felt for his family was now pierced with a terrible poignancy. For he saw that he, his wife, and his son were all subject to this same inexorable fate. These first three sights unveiled the fundamental problem of human existence, the problem he would later formulate as the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha. Dukkha is often translated as suffering, but it encompasses a far deeper meaning of inherent unsatisfactoriness, stress, and discontent that is woven into the fabric of all conditioned life. He had seen the dukkha of decay, the dukkha of pain, and the ultimate dukkha of death. His world of manufactured happiness lay in ruins. But on a fourth excursion, just as his despair was reaching its zenith, he saw a figure that offered not another problem, but the hint of a solution. He saw a sramana, a wandering ascetic, with a shaven head, clad in a simple ochre robe, walking with an air of profound peace and calm purpose. In a world now defined by suffering, this man's serenity was a striking anomaly. The prince asked Channa who this man was. Channa explained that this was a renunciant, one who had gone forth from the household life in search of a way to overcome old age, sickness, and death. In that moment, a path forward became clear to Siddhartha. The ascetic represented a life of active seeking, of confronting the problem of suffering head-on rather than trying to distract oneself from it. The life of a prince, with its endless cycle of fleeting pleasures, now seemed utterly meaningless. The life of a seeker, though arduous, held the promise of a genuine and lasting freedom. His resolve was forged. He would leave his palace, his power, and his family to embark on this noble quest. The act of renunciation was not one of cold detachment. On the night of his departure, at the age of 29, he stole into the chamber of his wife and newborn son. He longed to hold his child one last time but refrained, fearing that the touch would break his resolve and that Yashodhara would awaken. This was an act of agonizing sacrifice, born not from a lack of love, but from a love so vast and compassionate that it extended to all beings. He was leaving the few he loved to find a cure for the suffering that afflicted them and everyone else. He rode to the edge of the forest, cut off his princely hair with his sword, exchanged his fine robes for those of a mendicant, and walked alone into the wilderness. The search for enlightenment had begun. Part 3. The 6 years of struggle and the middle way. Freed from the confines of the palace, Siddhartha now entered the vast, open university of the forests of India, the traditional home of spiritual seekers. He was determined to learn from the most renowned teachers of his day. He first sought out Alara Kalama, a master of meditation who taught him to achieve a state of profound concentration known as the sphere of nothingness. With his exceptional discipline, Siddhartha quickly mastered this state, but he realized that while it provided a temporary peace, it was not the final answer. It was a sublime mental state, but it was still conditioned and impermanent. It did not uproot the causes of suffering. He then moved on to another teacher, Uddaka Ramapada, who guided him to an even more refined state of consciousness, the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. Once again, he achieved this state, but his divine discontent remained. He saw that these exalted states were escapes, not solutions. They did not lead to nibbana, the unconditioned, the deathless. Disappointed with the available teachings, Siddhartha resolved to find the path on his own. He fell in with a group of 5 ascetics, and for the next 6 years, he dedicated himself to the path of extreme self-mortification. This was a common spiritual practice at the time, based on the belief that subjugating the body would liberate the spirit. Siddhartha pursued this path with an iron will that astounded his companions. He practiced extreme fasting, reducing his food intake to a few grains of rice a day until his body was emaciated. His ribs protruded like a picket fence, and his skin clung to his bones. He endured scorching heat and biting cold. He practiced holding his breath until he experienced excruciating pain. He pushed his body and mind to the absolute limits of human endurance. Yet, after 6 years of this grueling struggle, he found himself no closer to enlightenment. In fact, his mind, once so sharp, was now clouded by physical weakness. He had nearly died from his efforts, but true wisdom remained as distant as ever. It was at this point, sitting by the Naranjara river, that a profound realization dawned on him. He had now experienced both extremes, the extreme of sensual indulgence in his palace and the extreme of self-torture in the forest. Neither had led to the truth. He remembered a moment from his childhood when, sitting under a rose apple tree while his father performed a state ceremony, he had spontaneously entered a state of meditative bliss, a state of calm and clarity that was both peaceful and alert. He realized then that the path to awakening did not lie in punishing the body, but in nourishing it just enough to support a clear and powerful mind. The body was not an enemy to be conquered but an instrument to be tuned. The path he sought was a middle way, Majjhima Patipada, between the two extremes he had so thoroughly explored. Making a decisive break with his past, he accepted a humble meal of milk rice from a village girl named Sujata. This act of self-care restored his physical strength. His 5 ascetic companions, however, were disgusted, seeing him take solid food. They believed he had given up the quest and abandoned him. Now, completely alone, Siddhartha felt not despair, but a renewed sense of purpose. He had found the principle that would guide him to his goal. With his body nourished and his mind clear, he walked toward a nearby grove and selected a large pipal tree, later to be known as the Bodhi tree, as his final seat of meditation. He sat down facing east and made a momentous vow: though my skin, my sinews, and my bones may wither, though my flesh and blood may dry up, I will not leave this seat until I have attained supreme and complete enlightenment. Part 4. The Awakening under the Bodhi tree. As Siddhartha sat in unshakable meditation, the stage was set for the final battle, not a battle with external foes, but with the deepest forces of his own mind. This internal struggle is personified in the Buddhist scriptures as the assault of Mara, the tempter, the lord of illusion and death. Mara represents all the subtle and powerful obstacles to awakening: sensual desire, fear, doubt, pride, and the very clinging to a sense of self. First, Mara tried to lure him away with his 3 beautiful daughters: craving, aversion, and discontent. When Siddhartha remained unmoved, his mind abiding in equanimity, Mara unleashed his demonic armies, hurling psychic weapons of fear and anger. But as they approached the Bodhisattva, the weapons transformed into offerings of flowers. His mind, protected by the armor of loving kindness and compassion, was impervious to hatred and fear. Finally, in a last-ditch effort, Mara challenged Siddhartha's right to even sit on the seat of enlightenment. "Who are you to claim this ultimate prize?" he demanded. "I am the lord of this world. My followers are countless. Who is your witness?" Siddhartha's retinue was gone. He was utterly alone. In a gesture of profound significance, he did not look to the heavens for a divine witness. Instead, he simply reached down and touched the ground with the fingers of his right hand. This is the famous, earth-touching mudra, Bhumisparsa mudra. He was calling upon the great earth itself to bear witness to the countless lifetimes of virtuous effort, of generosity, compassion, and patience, that had led him to this very spot. The earth, the scriptures say, roared its ascent, and Mara, finally defeated, vanished like a phantom, with his mind now completely pacified, clear, and concentrated. Siddhartha entered into progressively deeper states of meditation, dhyana. As the night deepened, his consciousness expanded, and he gained the three true knowledges, tavya, that constitute enlightenment. In the first watch of the night, he gained the power to recollect his own past lives. He saw, with vivid clarity, countless eons of his own births and deaths, as an animal, a human, a god, in realms of pleasure and realms of pain. He saw his own journey through the endless, beginningless cycle of rebirth, samsara. This was not a belief, but a direct, experiential knowledge. In the second watch of the night, he gained the divine eye, dibba kaku, with which he could see the arising and passing away of all beings in the universe. He saw how their destinies were shaped by their karma, how wholesome actions of body, speech, and mind led to fortunate rebirths, and how unwholesome actions led to suffering and unfortunate rebirths. He understood the intricate, impersonal law of cause and effect that governs all existence. In the third watch of the night, as the morning star rose in the eastern sky, he turned his mind to the final, ultimate task, the eradication of the deep-seated mental defilements, the cankers, or outflows, asavas. He penetrated the ultimate nature of reality. He saw, with unshakable clarity, the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, dukkha, the profound, pervasive unsatisfactoriness of all conditioned phenomena, the truth of the origin of suffering, samudaya, that this suffering arises from craving, tanha, the thirst for sensual pleasures, for existence, and for non-existence, rooted in fundamental ignorance, avijja, the truth of the cessation of suffering, nirodha, that there is a complete end to this suffering, a state of perfect peace and freedom called nibbana, the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering, magga, and that this state is realized by following the Noble Eightfold Path. As this direct knowledge arose, the final veils of ignorance were torn away. The cankers of sensual desire, of becoming, and of ignorance were utterly destroyed. His mind was liberated. At that moment, the quest was over. Siddhartha Gautama, the seeker, had vanished. In his place was the Buddha, the awakened one, perfectly and completely enlightened. He had done what had to be done. He had found the deathless. For several weeks, the Buddha sat in the bliss of liberation, experiencing the profound peace of nibbana. He initially hesitated to teach the Dharma he had discovered, fearing it was too deep and subtle for a world consumed by craving and delusion. But, according to the scriptures, the deity Brahma Sahampati appeared before him and implored him to teach for the sake of those with little dust in their eyes, who would be lost if they did not hear the path to liberation. Moved by a boundless compassion for all suffering beings, the Buddha agreed. He rose from his seat and set out for the deer park at Sarnath to find his 5 former companions and turn the wheel of Dharma for the very first time. The prince was gone. The ascetic was gone. The Buddha, the guide for all the world, had arrived.